All right, let's talk to political commentators Sophia Worringer and Jonathan Gibson. Jonathan, can I start with you on this one? Because Sir Keir Starmer has decided to tackle the issue of net migration, 689,000 or something like that it was last year. He says it needs to come down. He's not given any targets, so how does he plan to do it?
Absolutely, and thank you very much for having me on this programme. So yes, Keir Starmer has talked about the need to cut down on net migration, saying that it's currently shockingly high. He has been, I think, quite purposefully vague on exact numbers, that he is less hard to be held to sort of account, and I think that's broadly what opposition leaders do when there's an upcoming general election. They try and not be too specific on their policies, so I think that can be expected. But I think what he's talked about is trying to upskill British workers, trying to create systems through which companies have to prioritise using British labour rather than importing it from abroad. And this might mitigate some of the feelings that people are being left behind and unable to seek employment when there are, jobs which are being given to people, skilled workers who are coming in from abroad. So I think he's really signalling a political message that this is a topic that he does care about, to many voices across the country who do care about it. And he wants to make change, albeit in a somewhat vague capacity, and using much of what the Tories also have as a framework for tackling immigration.
Sophia, as we watch these leaders launch their battle buses, almost as though it's something new. I mean, for how many years have we had battle buses? You just wonder if there's anything new that the Tories can say that is going to lift them, even in the polls at the moment, or make any difference. What do you think?
I think the incumbent party always faces the challenge of why you did do the things that you said you're doing now while you were in office, when you had the levers of power to do that. So that's a very fair criticism being launched at the Conservative Party at the moment, when they talk about things like more GPs, more investment for hospitals and GP and diagnostic services. That's why did you not do that while you were in power? I think there are not so many policy differences, really, or massive policy differences between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. I think they're trying to fight this election on competence. And that is something that both leaders are trying to make the message that they are the most competent leader. And I know the Prime Minister is trying to make the message come through that Keir Starmer is at the mercy of the more left-wing faction of his party, which obviously Sir Keir Starmer has tried to stamp out over the last few weeks with the deselections of particular candidates. So I think it's less a policy battle and more a competence battle. And it is a shame that there are no big, bold policy ideas coming through, really, from either party. Obviously, we've had national service being talked about. We've had votes for at 16 being talked about. On the Labour side, they're trying to clearly make an offer to young people, but it's not really setting anyone alight from the policy perspective. I think this is a very political election rather than a policy conversation.
Well, on that point, Jonathan, I mean, how is Labour dealing with the left? Because it is a common theme, and we hear it from viewers and listeners all the time, people saying, well, if you vote for Labour, you vote for Starmer, you're going to get almost like a Corbynista style. I mean, I know he's not in the party anymore, but a Corbynista style left eventually, or even quite quickly, taking over. So how does he begin to combat that? Is it by, as it's claimed in the papers today, offering peerages to some of the more left MPs to get them to stand down, and so he can parachute people who are more to his way of thinking in?
I mean, I think, to be honest, he's already been combating the far left of his party very, very heavily, even since he's taken office. And that has been something which has been slightly surprising, I think, to me, is the extent to which he's actually successfully been able to do that. I mean, whether that's in regards to Jeremy Corbyn, whether that's with reducing the power of Labour or momentum in the party. He combed through Twitter accounts, social media accounts, to see whether people had liked anything or supported things which were controversial in the past. Obviously, recently we had the Diane Abbott scandal, as I can see on the screen, and that was definitely a big talking point. But I think that's a sign of how willing he is to try and reshuffle the party. I think everything in which he'd come out with in terms of moving the party back to the centre, his policies appear radically different to those in 2019. And he's very clearly set out how this isn't the Labour Party of 2019. It's a party which is much more, I'd say, centrist in its policies, much more based on sort of traditional, more neoliberal economic thinking. And he doesn't seem to have given much space or much power to those who are on the far left of the party. In fact, many of them have been far more silent on issues which the far left of the party have been struggling to confront. And so I'd say that he's not only been doing that in terms of who he selected, in terms of who he's allowing to stand, and in terms of his flagship policies, he's been able to kind of keep down the far left within his party and really reorientate his party in a way maybe you could compare to the early 2000s under Blair.
I mean, Sophia, maybe he doesn't have to worry at the moment. He is so far ahead in the polls. Maybe all he has to do is just keep steady and not do anything spectacular or say anything that could be taken badly by whoever on what side. Maybe that's it. He just has to be very, very careful and quite boring for the next few weeks.
I think that Ming vase strategy that you described, this idea they just have to very carefully take the situation forward without making any catastrophic mistakes, has been one the Labour Party have been pursuing for the last year and a half, 2 years. So I think that will definitely continue. And then obviously the challenge will be, if the Labour Party get into government, what their policies will be and how they will enact them. But just as an example on the bringing down legal migration we were talking about before, one of the proposals Labour has put forward is actually just enacting a law that already exists, so to cracking down on employers who break employment law, particularly regards to wage thresholds. And then the other one is something very vague of compelling Whitehall to ensure that British workers are employed over foreign workers. What does that mean? We're not sure. All these questions are going to have to come out if the Labour Party get into government. So I do think the Labour Party is trying really hard not to mess things up, and that is shown in Sir Keir Starmer's very strong crackdown on left-leaning part of his party candidates over the last few weeks. I don't think that's a good look for him. I think that makes him look paranoid. If the polls they are showing now and they carry on to election day, although obviously we expect them to narrow to some extent, as polls always do approaching polling day, the majority that the Labour Party will get will mean that the left-wing faction of the party will not have a stranglehold over their ability to pass laws, and they will be easily ignored. And I think it looks like he's paranoid and that he doesn't have control if he's trying to conform everyone to his viewpoint. So I think that actually having a broader church of the Labour Party makes him look more in control, and it's a shame that he thinks he's had to stamp down. Although I do think the left of the Labour Party are very dangerous. I don't think they are good policy makers. I don't think they are good politicians. It makes Sir Keir Starmer look paranoid if he is trying to control them too much.
OK. Sophia Worringer, Jonathan Gibson, good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.